Okay. Let's wait for a second. Let's move this here. Okay. I think we can start now. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. I wish today was as planned as I wanted to be because I'm a bit sick today. So excuse me if my voice is a little bit funny. My name is Leyla and I'm a legal consultant. And before I talk a little bit about my background, and I would like to note that today's webinar comes from my conclusions on the accepted educational systems around the world, be it developed or developing, and so therefore there will not be any mention of a specific country or legal system. I want to specifically talk about the role of learning basic legal knowledge at school and its benefits to the students at later stages of their lives. So we will discuss, we will also discuss some of the legal concepts and terminology so that I can demonstrate to you what I mean by basic legal knowledge. That being said, I would also like to note that for the sake of today's webinar, I mean, generally in my other webinars as well, I try to avoid using big words in legal jargon, as we call that, and so that my webinars are for everybody, and so people who can watch this and not get bored, basically. I studied both bachelor's and master's degrees in the UK. I went to law school in BPP School of Law and in the University of Westminster in London, and my focus was international commercial law. I hold professional certificates from WIPO's esteemed academy, focusing on intellectual property and two most widely used forms of alternative dispute resolution. I've held a variety of jobs in corporate previously, and I'm also a member of Chartered Institute of Arbitrators of the UK and offering my services as an arbitrator. I've been in the education sector for a number of years and dealing with both educational and legal matters. I've also held webinars on the topics of intellectual property, alternative dispute resolution, and education. Why basic legal knowledge is important for everyone? We can only start answering this question by giving different scenarios. For example, how do we decide what is going on around us or what is happening to us is legal or illegal? What if you are detained by an official? What happens when you are presented with a contract to sign? How do you decide whether the manner or conduct of an official or a company is legal and it's in par with the regulations? Do you even know when to or to which legal codes to look at if you want to cite the laws? Is what you're seeing an international or a local issue? How do all these laws in your country apply to minors and adults separately? Who decides which offences are more or less serious? We've all probably heard a lot about the importance of financial literacy that's being introduced and talked about at schools, how our children shall learn balance and checks and taxes and loan system, interests, and the importance of learning the essence of investments and funds. And I'm glad to see these big words, big concepts being introduced at schools, but this should also apply to common and basic legal knowledge at schools. And today I'll try to talk about why. First of all, knowing the law can protect us from wrongdoings or wrongdoers or even misunderstandings. Resting assured that our children will be protected from mishaps of life due to our financial or statutory positions. This can pose more harm to them than anything else. Learning what is legal or illegal can prevent your children from being deceived, hurt, or even prevent them from making fatal mistakes. For example, by learning to spot minor offences, possession of illegal substances, for example, human trafficking, fraud, and many wrongdoings that can happen to anybody. And this can happen to them regardless of their age and their situation. And by learning this, they can better protect themselves. As I always tell people, and every parent or guardian, and they can agree with me, that they shall make sure their child's educational path is filled with all the instruments for them to protect themselves and to basically prevent making big mistakes in the future. And this includes knowing the law. That's why I've put protection here. Another reason is it can save time and prevent costs. Why do we see every business or a business person hiring a lawyer? In my opinion, one of the most important bits of learning legal knowledge shall be learning contracts. The reason for that, so that our children can be prepared to read and understand different contracts presented to them in the future. So when this happens, what we see often is sometimes they're presented with contracts to sign and they just hastily sign them away, and they don't spot sham clauses, which is deceiving, like clauses within these contracts. And sometimes, as we know, fully legal contracts can induce us into agreeing unfavorable conditions, and especially if we lack basic legal knowledge or skills to spot them. Unnecessary times given under these contracts can cause us to lose a necessary portion of our times, which, as we know, is an irreplaceable currency. Thirdly, in education, what we value the most is to help students so they can think on their own. Instilling critical thinking is very important to building strong characters for the future. In the education system of many developed countries, students are expected to use their logic as well as the knowledge given to them. The way lawyers deal with different situations and is they do a lot of brainstorming and a lot of attention to detail. Just like any part of our bodies, our brain is the same. If we don't use that often, over time, we lose the ability to use it, at all. So such brainstorming and helps us make quick and efficient decisions in life. You may all have observed that all the lawyers almost, they think the same. The thinking process is the same, decision-making process is the same. And this is due to all this brainstorming that happens at early stages of their lives. Talking about this, critical thinking and attention to detail. These were strongly encouraged during my college and university years, especially at law school. Everybody can, this is what they always told us, everybody can read the laws and statutes, but it takes years of learning and skills to be able to spot relevant law and on any given issue and apply those laws correctly to the issues. And however, what I always say, having basic knowledge in law can pretty much do the same. People with legal training or knowledge are able to spot problems with more ease compared to the average person, because learning law, constantly working scenarios, programs our brain to focus on problems plus solutions. So there are no other distractions within this equation. It's problems plus solutions. And this means that issues can look complex to an average eye, but to a trained eye, the solution is usually right there. Think of this as using a roadmap, special roadmap to get to a destination. I would like to briefly talk about the various legal systems and concepts and offences, or types of misconducts, just to demonstrate to all what I really mean by knowing legal knowledge, basic legal knowledge. Though principles, legal principles and concepts might be same or similar everywhere, the way the laws are printed and applied and can be confusingly different in other parts, many parts of the world. That being said, a main difference we often see in different countries is that they either use common law, like the UK, Canada, or civil law, which can sometimes be referred to as constitution or written laws. And majority of the world around us, they use civil law system. To narrow it down without using too much history, in common law, the cases or verdicts delivered by the judges are equal to decisions, or equal to laws, sorry. And they're applied to the cases in the future. And this is called the law of precedent, because as the name speaks, the new decision given in a case precedes the other one, the previous one. There are written laws, such as statutes and acts, basically, but they're written usually vaguely and to allow the judges to work their way around that and interpret that according to the case they're working on. It is often difficult for culprits to run away from such system because the decision-making, decision-making process is tailored to the facts of the case, so there's no way around it. On the other hand, in the civil law systems, there are solid written laws, such as constitutions and codes. These are often strictly applied and referred to, and the past cases are basically a mere reference point rather than applicable laws, not like in common law. And therefore, if we're working on a fraud case, for example, in my country, I have to use the codes. I have to refer to a certain code and a certain clause within these laws and the constitution, and I can only use previous cases as just a reference point, just to put a weight on my side of the argument. It's not an applicable law. It is due to this that we see business or business persons hiring lawyers from where their businesses or they're based, basically. I once witnessed a company from Baltic country bringing their own lawyers to work on a case in their Middle East branch, and I think it was 6 months back and forth. There nothing that could be done, and finally they decided to hire a lawyer from as a local law firm to sort out their case. And so then things started going well in their favor. This was an issue lawyers faced, and imagine, I mean, not just lawyers, but professionals. And imagine someone who's not in a legal field. There are, of course, other legal systems in place, such as canon law, which is famously used in different provinces of Switzerland and Vatican, I think, and some parts of Europe. Canon law derives its origins from religious and customary laws, similar to Islamic laws that are applied in the majority of Muslim countries. Here you can see a 1917 edition of a canon law codex, I think, compiled by the Catholic Church. And this edition is thought to be the most extensive one since the formation of canon law in 900s. And basically what its difference is its difference from Islamic law is Islamic law uses Quran, the Holy Book Quran, and practices of teachings of Prophet Muhammad, and that was written down and recorded by people around him during his time. So they're two different, they look similar but different types of laws. sets of laws. And there are also hybrid legal systems, like in Dubai, where let's say you have a dispute related to your business, and you may either wish to bring a case under the local Emirati laws, or through the special court system called the DIFC court, which operates with laws similar to ones under the common law. This system is what makes Dubai a place for international businesses. And time and time again, we see how well the hybrid system does, and it can create an environment for international businesses to operate safely. The reason it's important to discuss these systems is so that when your child goes on to study in an international school or wants to build a life for themselves abroad, they're better able to understand where the laws come from, the laws in the country they're living at. For example, the act of negligence, which is a lack of necessary care by a reasonable person. It is fined or punished harsher in some countries than others. In the UK, negligence falls under the law of torts, while it can be a penal code in some parts, in some other places. By the way, negligence is a topic that I'm willing to make a webinar about, and I think it is something that should definitely be, the law of torts should definitely be taught at schools. Let me see if I can, okay. Talking about torts, that's why I forgot I mentioned it here. Another example worth discussing is, I mean, this is something I always wished students or children at a young age are taught or at least introduced to, is which is levels of offences. In general, the topic of offences. Here I've given the USA and UK as examples, so you guys have a rough idea of the hierarchy of seriousness of offences. So when we talk about offences or just the word crime, we often think of very serious crimes such as burglary, driving under influence, possession of drugs, homicide, but we don't often think of small steps that can gradually take us there, things that are counted as offences at all. We may have a family member or a friend or someone we know, we might even see that on the news or the movies, that someone commits a crime without knowing it's a crime. For example, playing with fire. For teenagers or minors, it might seem like a fun thing to play with, let's say, hand fireworks on special occasions, like a bonfire, for example, or throwing away a cigarette butt once they finish smoking it, or burning a match without giving a second thought. They burn a match and they throw away the burnt bit. And once this seemingly the thought, that action that you haven't given a second thought about, this causes fire, a huge fire, and it damages the property, either yours or the public's or other people. It's called arson, and it's burning things on fire and setting things on fire, which is an offense. And so another example I would give you is having a loud argument in your own house. Once this seemingly private altercation can turn into an offense if the police is called on you by your neighbors or people living next door, because it can amount to nuisance, which is also an offense. And because in the eyes of the law, we all have a duty to respect the peace of mind of our neighbor and our community. We may have a family, if we're talking about more serious offences, what I see often is people at large are unaware of differences in seriousness of offences, such as grievous bodily harm or actual bodily harm. One is causing temporary damage to a person's body, like cuts and scrapes, while the other one involves deep fractures and irreversible health issues. and more long-lasting serious illnesses. There have been cases in the UK where teens have been arrested, in the US, sorry, where teens have been arrested and charged for an offence called jaywalking, which is walking aimlessly on a road meant for vehicles. And each of these defense provided by these teens during their trial included things like, I did not know it was an offence. So you can see here how lack of knowledge can cause inconvenience and potentially ruin a young person's life. If our children learn different levels of offences and the actions that take us there, they may be able to build better judgment of a situation when they ended up in one. Since I'm a consultant, not a prosecutor or lawyer dealing with criminal cases, I have often dealt with cases where landlords or business partners defrauded each other. Fraud is a serious wrongdoing that can be counted as criminal depending on the damage it inflicts on the victim. Fraud is defined as a deceitful act carried out with the intention of personal financial gain. Some of the less serious and more common case of fraud is misrepresentation, and I hate this thing. Let's say you're willing to buy a property, and you've seen a property in a beautiful beachside. It's a villa, and it's the property of your dreams, and it suits your budget. And you don't bother doing a little research on that, and you really like everything about it. You've done the viewing, you talk to the agent, and you rest assured that everything is fine with the property, such as there are no claim rights to it, there are no mortgage issues with that, it's safe for occupation, previous owners were clean, and etc. So there are no issues with it. But once you've signed that sale of purchase, got your documents, and moved in, you find out that there's been a crime has taken place in this house previously, and there's nothing you can do about it because for you, and you're uncomfortable with this fact, even though there's no trace of it in the house. But you're just uncomfortable about it, and you think the agent has lied to you or the seller has lied to you. Luckily, when something like this, I think to me it's serious, something serious like this happens, you can end your contract citing misrepresentation, which was done either by a seller or the agent. Misrepresentation here being the concealment of important information, because concealing such a fact can amount to lying. That's what you can argue. In the UK, the courts can accept this, and you'll most likely be compensated. But in, for example, the UAE, the courts may not make a decision on your favor, and they may not even consider this as misrepresentation. For them, it was something like, oh, it's something either agent forgot to tell you, or that it's immaterial to the fact that the property is perfectly fine for resale or occupation. So that's that. In the past, though, I have defended many tenants against fraudulent landlords, where most of the time they try to extort money after the tenants by misappropriating their deposit money, which usually is given back to you at the end of your contract. And they will do that by trying to present the house unlivable, and they would do that by showing badly taken pictures of the walls, or a few scratches here and there, some stains on the carpet, and they would usually this would usually happen to students in a different country, because the landlords often see them as this less equipped to contest their accusations. And because they often use laws as a pressure point, and that would scare them into handing it over their deposit. Some of the actions of these landlords can be breach of contractual duty, since if there is a presence of a contract between a tenant and a landlord, and any action of the landlord can be counted as breach of contract, because the behavior of the fraudulent behavior of the landlord the tenant can cite the breach of the contract, because by saying the landlord's not sticking to the contract and by acting fraudulent. As I mentioned, there are more serious cases of fraud which can result in imprisonment and a huge fine. This can vary from tax evasion to counterfeiting, which is copying something and selling it for way lower price and deceiving the buyer, the consumer. And sorry, another example would be embezzlement, pyramid schemes, Ponzi schemes, and these are all mechanisms of fraud, basically. Talking about pyramid scheme here, I want to show you a 2-minute clip from an American mockumentary series called The Office. And some of you will probably know this. They will probably know the scene as well. The summary of the scene is that Michael Scott, who's a seemingly clueless manager of a small national paper company, and here he is trying to outsmart his staff by trying to introduce new money-making strategies, and without realizing the absurdity and illegality of the strategy. The result is this priceless scene. I don't know if I can show you. I don't know if you guys can see it. I hope you guys can see the videos. Guys could see the video. I think, yeah, that was a little bit. I think that was a little bit. It's okay. I can include this video later on. But it was fun. I love this series. This office is filled with scenes like this. It is even funnier when you've known many people like this in the managerial positions. Back to our talk. The reason I talked a little bit more about offences and given different scenarios is, and as examples, is I wanted to not only inform you about various forms of wrongdoings, but to create the picture in your head. And basically, the reason I also wanted to show you this video, and I'm really gutted that it didn't show properly, that these various forms of wrongdoings can happen to anybody, and it can happen. It can, or you can you can be a victim of it, or you can commit it, knowingly or unknowingly. And this can be huge corporations, heads of state, managers, as Michael Scott, investors, medical practitioners, So anyone you may think, oh, he or she is a professional, they might know better. It either takes a painful experience or simply a little bit of learning and to avoid problems in the future. Let's talk briefly about terminology. I often tell my friends and family to familiarize themselves with legal terminology. So if they are starting a business, hiring a worker, talking with their colleagues at work, they do not sound ignorant or seem like a clueless person in general. As I mentioned, usually in common law systems, in order to be a practicing lawyer, you need to graduate from law school and then make one of the two main choices. Either be a solicitor or a barrister. The path to becoming a barrister is to becoming a solicitor is to take the 1-year legal practice course in a licensed center or university, doesn't matter, and then apply to sit in different departments of a law firm, which is called the training contract. Once you've completed this, you can finally take an exam to qualify to be a solicitor. Solicitors will, as the name speaks, they will often give advice and draft memos and then conduct legal affairs on your behalf, and sometimes can represent you in first instances of court. Another option would be to take barrister training course following graduation, which can be up to a year, and then shadow a judge or a barrister to then take an exam to become a barrister. Barristers often work at courts alongside prosecutors, judges, and other experienced barristers. Basically, what happens is you will see barristers wearing these funny wigs at the courts, and you can see them in the movies, or if you've been to the UK, you can see them walking around. And this is once they're in a court representing somebody, they wear these wigs. This is part of their uniform. Lawyers, on the other hand, are people practicing law in general. In civil law systems, people working in legal field are often referred to as lawyers. Full stop. Once they graduate law school and start their job at a law firm or even a company within their legal department, and they can be referred to as lawyer or associate, or in entry levels they can be paralegals or legal researchers. I am considered a lawyer in my country, but I always call myself a consultant because I only give advice to people on legal matters. I don't do other things that lawyers do. You might often hear the word attorney or attorney at law in movies or from the Americans. And sometimes you meet an American person, they can be like, are you an attorney? And this usually means a practicing lawyer. So it's just the way Americans have worded it. It can be a barrister or solicitor. Speaking of lawyers, I would also like to briefly talk about the roles of different institutions and within the legal framework. There are different professional services offered by both international and local companies. These include companies such as PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, sometimes you see in short EY, and they usually work with banks and companies and individuals as well. Also, there are law firms solely offering legal services, such as Denton's, Baker & McKenzie, it's an American firm, DLA Piper, and so on. Solicitors often prefer to work in firms like these before they gain enough experience to then go on to either practice on their own independently or open a law firm of their own. The international these firms will usually deal with civil or commercial cases. That's what I've witnessed. But depending on their practice area or the nature of the lawyers that they have at their workplace, they might accept more serious cases or cases with criminal nature. The international organizations such as the UN, United Nations Human Rights, the United Nations Human Rights Committee, deal with the rights of individuals from all walks of life. The International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, which is shortly ICSID, offers services to individuals to settle business to state or person to state disputes. The Alternative Dispute Resolution Services of the World Intellectual Property Organization offers individuals and businesses to settle their intellectual property related disputes on an international scale. For example, you might find out that an industrial design you have registered globally is being illegally distributed and is being infringed in, I don't know, Japan. And you should know that you're not limited to the local laws that may not extend to other jurisdictions. And WIPO can accept your case, your request to challenge such infringement cases. The role of courts and parliaments are fundamentally different. I've put the role of parliaments here and courts separately. As we know, the legislation is first introduced, discussed, and passed in Parliament. People with little or no knowledge of law can sometimes misjudge the situation their lawyers are in. They may expect their lawyers to go above and beyond what the law provides, basically. I will give you an example. In one civil law jurisdiction, I witnessed that the civil code was overridden by a decree signed by the head of state. This decree had all the parliamentary approvals, and what happened is what happened was that the decree had no clarification as to the application of the laws given under the code. So the code was saying something else, the constitution is saying something else, and the decree was saying something else. The decree stated that the identification of trademarks shall be made by a government institution. But the law said, the constitution said, the determination shall be made within a set criteria given under the code. So it's not up to the discretion of organization or a government body. It is there to alleviate bias, a potential bias. And imagine, in such case, what could your lawyer do? In such cases, there's not much lawyers can do, because when in fact the laws given here, the situation here is unworkable. Imagine this case brought to a local court, arguing that the business owner is not supposed to adhere to the actual constitution because, well, the government body had already issued its approval. The courts may actually strike out this case, citing that the constitution is not, the situation here is not in par with the constitution. So you can see the limits of your lawyers in such an unworkable and confusing situation. Knowing the roles of different organizations also allow you to expand your options in case your basic human right is violated. Many asylum seekers, for example, or those who successfully moved to their desired asylum country, they always say that they wish they knew sooner the options they have. United Nations Human Rights Council ensures the basic human rights. So I hope I didn't go back here. I didn't go back. I thought I switched the. Sorry about that. So it's fine, yeah. The United Nations Human Rights Council, it ensures the basic human rights of persons from member countries are protected, and they sometimes get involved with the policy making of those countries. I will give you an example you probably never thought about. Before the Brexit, the EU could interfere with some of the decisions made by the sovereign government of the UK. If they believed a court decision violated any of the human rights of a member state. As I mentioned above, ICSID deals with person-to-state related disputes. If you forfeit your business or investment unjustly in a member state, and this was done to you, towards you due to involvement or lack thereof of the government, you can settle your dispute with the help of this organization. So you see, knowing briefly or a little bit about the rules of each of these organizations can help a lot if you're a young person, if you're anybody who's not in legal field, it can help you a lot to know your options and what you can do in such situations. This is the slide I wanted to come to. I want to talk about legal concepts briefly. I know we have just a little bit of time, and maybe I should have mentioned these earlier, but I have my own reasons. What I believe we should all teach our kids is to spot and define legal concepts. It is very important, as I mentioned earlier, that we understand the situation we are in before proceeding to make important decisions. We should be able to understand some of these legal concepts I've given here, because they define the way our governments and societies function. I have examples here of some of the most important legal concepts, but you may think of your own as well. One of the first concepts that are taught in law school is the concept of separation of powers. Separation of powers can be best described as the court being separate from the state. In parliamentary governments, this usually means the parliament or legislative body of state, the executive, which is ministries and offices, and the court work independently without interfering with each other. Countries where this concept is properly applied, we can see or we can observe a more liberal approach to governance and less bureaucracy. So when the court makes a binding decision on a case or a matter, other government bodies can't, in theory, get involved in the decision-making process. Another one is judicial review. This is more of a procedure, like a procedure carried out by the courts to determine whether a decision made under the other government bodies is applicable and practical, and basically applicable to the society. It is not a procedure for courts to make a counter decision, but it's more like where judges, experienced judges and court members are able to challenge that decision and say, look, this is what should be added, or this is how it should be applied. It is more like when you finish your work, when you finish your coursework, let's say, and you want someone who's more knowledgeable to have a check for you before you submit that for finals. Another concept I'd like to talk about is freedom of speech. This is a universal concept and is often a popular theme for conversations, and as you can all agree, a tool in political arena. This can be a debated issue, but this is what we observe most often. We often see this being propagandized by largely meritocratic and democratic countries against countries where freedom of speech is either fully suppressed or media is either fully or partially censored. Freedom of speech, in theory, means being able to express oneself without being scrutinized or persecuted by a government. However, in reality, even the most democratic countries, this only stays on paper. There's a word I really like, and many lawyers like, is freedom of speech is not freedom from consequence. There are laws in every country, and some apply this stronger than others, that deal with false and derogatory or explicit expressions. Some countries have punishments for expressing contrary views and unsubstantiated claims against against their state or state person, from fines to serious jail time. Even though these may seem like intrastate affairs, as I mentioned just now, other countries can use this concept as a pressure tool in the political chess game. This brings us to privacy. Here I want to give a different example, because from the dawn of men, the concept of privacy has taken many forms up until today. Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations deems it a fundamental human right. Article 12 states, "No one shall be subject to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks." The issue of privacy is more is more relevant in our time because of the internet and the intrusive role of social media. Some of the most interesting questions I get, are from the young enthusiasts and our generation and the ones after us. We cannot imagine a time where there's no internet. It's undeniable that the existence of internet alters the way our societies function. Social media platforms, they've given us a vast amount of options in terms of choosing what to wear, what to eat, where to go, even who and what to believe in. The modern business model customizes their marketing strategy mainly around the algorithm provided by this vast system that transcends borders and nations. And it's only right that certain governments and international organizations would like to put restrictions to it and design laws to regulate it. Many famous social media platforms that we use daily, they already restrict certain content such as graphic, pornographic, hate speech and spread of misinformation. However, some lawyers might argue that, I'm one of these lawyers, that these laws are designed to mainly protect these companies running these platforms. In comparison to their users, they are given a minimal protection against online abuse, theft of the users' intellectual property, defamation, like defamatory posts and expressions, and so on. Since our kids start using the internet from a young age, basic legal knowledge surrounding online content and the content regulation can protect them. Learning them. The laws surrounding the content given within these platforms are also ever-changing to cater to the new norms. Have you ever opened a website and the first thing that pops up is, do you accept cookies? Or when you buy a new smartphone or open an account within these websites, I think you all get these terms and conditions which you inevitably click and agree and just to move forward, just to open your account, just so that you can use the website. The fact that a website is required to ask you your permission to place tracking bug in your computer based on the IP and personal code of your device is a way for these websites to legally protect themselves against potential lawsuits. Because it is such an intrusive practice towards the users. They track your behavior online to study you better so they can tailor the content to your needs and sell this information to the companies that are paying for that. If you've paid attention recently, now cookies pop up. I don't know if I have it here. They also give you a list of the type of information they collect about you. So that when you decide to sue them or tell them you're going to have a legal action for collecting information about you, which you refused, they can then counter-argue that, well, you consented to that. We've given you the list before you clicked. New practices are in place due to the recent strict set of laws introduced by the EU called the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. There are different set of, there's a different set of laws in different parts of the world, but the GDPR places a huge responsibility on the companies to disclose what type of information is collected, to whom they're sold, and whether the user has a choice to consent or not. Therefore, now many social media platforms are required to show you what type of information they take from you and provide more pop-ups which show how they use that info. I believe our youth should be more aware of what laws are there to regulate what's going on the internet. And in case of violation of privacy, online abuse, or content that's been stolen, that they're aware of the process, and they know they have choices and know which laws to adhere to and where to look for to find answers. The reason I had to discuss the concepts and roles of the organizations in detail is to give you an idea what I really mean by knowing the basics of legal knowledge. What I mean the basic of this. So it's not just opening and reading it. Because when I talk about universally accepting legal knowledge in curricula, I often get replies such as, we have lawyers for that, or anyone can just look up the laws, or as I said, we have Google for that. This is my favorite. These may be true for the smartphone era youth, but unfortunately, as I talked about it, in the era of social media, our youth finds it hard to use their time on internet to read up on basics of law. They just roam around and scroll through social media. As professionals and educators, it is up to us to encourage them to learn the basics when it comes to law. Because as we talked about, knowing the law can protect them from many mishaps of life, will save them and us time and prevent unnecessary costs. And all these will be because learning the things lawyers are taught at school practices our brain to always think critically and apply solutions to the problems directly. Having basic legal knowledge also provides us with the freedom to choose from options that that we may have at the time of need, be it violation of our rights, our basic human rights, contractual issues we may have with others, or banks, or public bodies. And there are different sorry, I thought the screen is gone. No, the screen is here, sorry. And so yeah, learning basic legal knowledge can help our children a lot. When I was in law school, I would attend external seminars and conferences to learn about other fields. And this would be sciences, applied sciences, finance, governance, entrepreneurship, and etc. I always knew that knowing much more can only benefit me in the future. And the way schools can do this, can introduce basic legal knowledge at schools, is to, by facilitating learning, by facilitating learning legal knowledge. And they would do that by inviting speakers to speak at the schools, such as lawyers, barristers, solicitors, judges, experienced professionals, consultants, paralegals, anybody who is in the legal system. They can invite them to hold free seminars or hold webinars like I'm doing, so students can be encouraged to come and listen and learn more. And this is a lot of the time, this is how it happens at schools, where they bring somebody, they invite somebody to talk about a topic, and they don't talk about their field. And one or two students, at least one or two, will be encouraged to learn. Thank you for today. Thank you for your time today. And I'm really sorry that my voice is a little bit funny. I wish I could do better. And I wish I could show you the video of the office, the scene, which is really applicable to the situation I was describing. And hopefully I will see you all in my next webinar. And thank you again for attending today. Bye-bye.